Today I'm joined by the director of March for Life UK, Isabel Vaughan-Spruce, who was arrested by the British police twice in the span of 5 months and faced charges of protesting and engaging in an act that is intimidating to service users for standing still and praying silently outside of the British Pregnancy Advisory Service Clinic in Birmingham. Now, Isabel has come all the way from the UK to Hungary to share her fascinating story and extraordinary faith and bravery, and to encourage her fellow pro-life advocates to stand up for life, even in defiance of persecution and threats of arrest. Isabel, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Dominic.
And before we jump into today's topic, I would just love to hear a little bit about your background. You know, how did you become involved with the pro-life movement in the United Kingdom?
Good question. Well, I think, growing up, I loved reading stories about the war. It showed the real worst in people, but it also showed heroism at its finest. And I found, maybe when I was reading these books, that I'd be asking myself the question, what would I have done if I'd been alive in those terrifying situations? And I gradually realised I was asking myself the wrong question. It's not a case of what would I have done then, but what am I doing now? And I became more aware of the fact that there is still a battle going on. So I got very interested in the pro-life movement, recognising that this is probably the greatest battle that's going on for life today. And was just keeping an eye out really for opportunities that might come to actually get actively involved. I would be financially supporting pro-life work, praying for it. And I just happened to see a letter once in a magazine called the Crusader magazine, which was started by Maximilian Kolbe. And it was a letter about somebody who went outside abortion centres to pray. And I contacted them. They helped me to find the nearest abortion centre to me where other people were praying outside, which was in Birmingham. And what started off as just a kind of one-off turned into something I was doing for Lent, and then I just carried on doing it.
And am I right that you've been doing this for over 2 decades? Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been doing it for around 20 years now. Obviously started off just praying with other people, but then after 10 years or so, I heard about 40 Days for Life, and we started 40 Days for Life in Birmingham, which I still run there, and that's really grown from strength to strength. And then also started doing the March for Life UK as well now.
Well, I remember reading your recent story, your story of arrest, and I'm thinking inside that, well, this is a little bit odd. But then as I looked at the video footage, I said to myself, this cannot possibly happen. Could you please tell our viewers, what did happen on December 6th, 2022, and what went through your head when the police took you to custody?
Yeah, and just to say, I can understand you thinking this could never really happen, because I almost felt that myself, even though it was happening to me. It felt very surreal at the time. It was hard to really take in that this was happening. Obviously, as I say, for years, I've been going outside abortion centres, praying, offering help to women. But last year, they brought in what's called a PSPO, that's a Public Space Protection Order. And these are local laws that used to be used for things like tackling dog fouling or drunken disorderly behaviour in certain areas. They'd be brought in by local councils and police forces working together. But now they're starting to be used around abortion centres to create these zones where certain behaviour is prohibited. So this zone was created around the abortion centre in Birmingham, where we'd run our 40 Days for Life previously. And they created this zone that said certain behaviour was banned. Just to make it clear, it doesn't ban people, it bans behaviour, and it labelled protesting as a type of behaviour that was banned if it was connected to abortion. And they actually labelled prayer and counselling as forms of protest that they were trying to prevent in that area.
What I thought was interesting is that when I looked at the footage, you weren't even showing any outward sign that you were praying. Your hands were literally in your pocket. And I'm not sure when they searched you, did they even find a rosary or anything in your pockets, or,
Absolutely. And I think this is a really important point, that the prayer wasn't even being manifest. It's not like I was holding a Bible or standing there waving a rosary. To anyone looking, I could have been, waiting for a friend, waiting for a taxi. In fact, when I was at the police station, I was shown photographs that I presume some of the locals had taken from their house windows of me standing there. And someone asked me, you know, were you praying in those photographs? And I honestly couldn't say, because at some points I got distracted and thought about my lunch. You know, sometimes I'd be thinking about other things. Sometimes I'd refocus and, you know, and start to pray again. But looking at a photograph, even I couldn't tell whether I was praying or not. So it would be impossible for anyone else to know what was going on in my own mind outside the abortion centre.
And so what happened afterwards? You know, the police, we can hear it in the footage. He asked you, the police officer is like, are you praying? And you said, well, I might be praying in my head. And what happened afterwards? Why was that answer that you're praying in your head was not sufficient for the police to basically leave you alone?
Just to say, yeah, I think that they were really keen to prevent anyone who was pro-life going in that area, even though that isn't what the law says. So yes, they searched me and then took me to the police station. And when I was at the police station, they were actually questioning me under caution, you know, what were you praying about? And I know some people have said, oh, it wasn't to do with the prayer, but that's exactly what I was questioned on when I was at the police station. You know, what were your prayers for? What, you know, basically what was going on inside your own head. And whilst I didn't feel obliged to answer that question, because I don't think that is anyone else's business, even the police.
Absolutely not.
It was actually a great opportunity to share with them, you know, what I'd been praying for, which was for many women I knew who'd been really hurt by abortion. And that was an opportunity to witness to those police and share with them how much abortion can really damage women.
And so what was going through your head? You know, you were there and of course the police is approaching you. You were standing there silently. You were not even speaking a single word out loud. And they started asking you questions and then they're taking you into custody. What was going through your head?
I have to say, you know, when the police were there, I was still trying to keep a kind of spirit of prayer in my heart. I wouldn't want it to be taken over by maybe that feeling of anger or, you know, indignation, which from a human perspective could easily rise up.
Absolutely.
So I just kept trying to, whenever I wasn't conversing with the police, just kept trying to pray interiorly about the issue and about the situation. Because, you know, these police officers, obviously, they need to hear the message of what's true as well. It's just important to use these opportunities to share the truth, whether it's about our faith or about our pro-life beliefs, to whoever might be willing to hear it, really.
And so what happened afterwards? You know, you were taken into custody, they questioned you there. What was the outcome of
So eventually I was charged, yeah, and I was charged with engaging in an act intimidating of service users as well as protesting. And of course, the irony is there were no service users. The abortion centre was closed.
Yeah, that was sort of fascinating for me that I've read that on that specific day, it wasn't even opened. So there was no one to really intimidate.
Yeah, so I'd been there 4 times at that point inside the buffer zone, and each of those times the abortion centre had not been open. So it was impossible for me to have been intimidating any service users. Not that that's anything I have ever done or would ever advocate anyone doing. I don't believe prayer is a form of intimidation. But yeah, that just shows how ridiculous it all is, that's what my charge actually was. But when I went to court, which I finally did, I was completely acquitted of any wrongdoing.
So, and you had a second time, you know, literally, am I right, 3 weeks later, basically the same event occurred. You know, history repeated itself. So
yeah, just over 2 weeks after that, I went and stood exactly the same place, again, silently praying in my head, not manifesting that in any way, not trying to talk to anyone or give out any leaflets. Not that we'd ever had any posters there, but I never had a poster. And this time, 6 police officers came with a police van. And the police officer actually said to me, your prayers are an offence. And I reminded him that I wasn't saying anything out loud, that the prayer was simply silent in my own mind. And he said, it's still an offence, very emphatic. And again, took me away in a police van to the police station. You know, when it comes to legal proceedings, this whole story just seems to me that it was sort of pretty much disproportionate. You know, all the sort of methods that the police used, or all the charges that you had to face, you know, those were all really disproportionate based on your actions, what you were doing outside the abortion clinic. Yeah, and my concern would be anyway with the fact of prayer being labelled as something particular that can't happen in that area. I feel this is very discriminatory towards people of faith, because it isn't saying that you can't think about abortion. It's saying specifically pray, that prayer is something that they are concerned about. And what is prayer? It's simply our thoughts directed towards God. So they're saying, whilst you can still think about this, if your thoughts are directed towards God, then suddenly this becomes something that's deemed offensive, which, as I say, that's really discriminatory to those of us who've got faith.
Well, yes, it basically violating freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and many other things.
Yes, there's a long list of them.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, do you think someone reported you, basically? So, I mean, you said you've been going back almost on a weekly basis for the past 2 decades, walking there, standing there, praying there. So you think someone just got really annoyed that you're staying outside the abortion clinic?
So I know it was certain residents who were there who they are partly responsible for this PSPO, the buffer zone, coming in to start with. They have been campaigning to try and get rid of us. And I know they took photographs of me when I was praying inside the buffer zone, and sent that to the police and contacted the police to tell them that I was there. Yeah, so I think some of those local people would be the ones that the police told me that they had reports from locals of me standing there.
And so could you tell us, where is the whole legal proceeding now? Is it concluded? Is it over now, or?
So my bail carries on till the 7th of this month, 7th of June. And the sad thing is that in England, there's now national buffer zones being voted in. So it's not just a case of concerns about these PSPOs, which is what I've been charged, or in the past have been charged with breaking. But now we have the prospect of a buffer zone outside every single abortion facility in the UK. And that was voted in our parliament.
And so how many abortion facilities are there, maybe just in Birmingham and also around the UK? Can you give us an estimate number?
I think, in a way, it would be difficult to quantify, because it's whether we're looking at just abortion centres or hospitals that also provide abortions. And also now we've got a common practice of abortion pills being sent out by post. That's become very common, because approximately 90% of the abortions in the UK are medical abortions. They're from pills rather than surgery. And an increasing amount of these are sent out to women or teenagers in their own homes. So many women now aren't even going to an abortion centre to have an abortion. They're just phoning up. They don't have to even speak to a doctor, let alone see one. And then those pills would be sent out to them without them even having a scan. And they would, in the isolation of their own homes, would have that abortion and be left to dispose of their own child. It's traumatic.
When did this whole process become so absurd, so extreme, that women can even do these things in their own private homes?
Well, that particular law came in when COVID was happening. And I think they simply used that as an opportunity to forward an agenda that they'd had for a long time, to try and make it even easier for a woman to have an abortion, labelling it as essential health care, which, when you look at what actually happens particularly with medical abortions, I think recent statistics showed in the UK that approximately 1 in every 17 women who has a medical abortion ends up in hospital because of complications. And this is being peddled as healthcare, essential healthcare, and that's what happened when we had COVID and certain lockdowns were happening. They said, this must still happen. So we were prevented then from going outside abortion centres, but they made sure that not only did abortion centres still stay open, but also abortion pills were then allowed to be sent out in the post to women.
So the PSPO, was that also sort of came into effect during the lockdown, the COVID-19 lockdown? So
PSPOs have been around for a little while. The one in Birmingham actually only came into effect last year, but there's one, there's a couple in London now as well, and they actually were before the COVID lockdown. Okay. So in a way, that's something that they've just been pushing irrespective of COVID.
And that's sort of as a response to your prayer vigils, or to your, I don't know, how would you say, but March for Life?
Absolutely. I think in a way it shows how effective it is not only to pray outside abortion centres, but to offer alternatives to women and couples there. You know, I know well over 100 women in Birmingham, just over a short period, who changed their minds, sometimes at the very last minute, because there was somebody there offering an alternative. And a lot of people will say, oh, women, you know, don't make up their minds, or sorry, women do already make up their minds before they get to an abortion centre. You know, there's no point anyone being there. But I would say it's very different from my experience. The amount of women who are still not sure right up until the last minute, or sometimes even when they've had the first set of tablets, then they change their mind and look for the abortion reversal pill. But otherwise, they're making up their minds based on very limited choices. You know, there just simply isn't alternatives presented to them, and so they think their only choice is to have an abortion. And when we present an alternative, some of them are very ready to accept that alternative.
So you're also a pro-life counsellor and the director for March for Life UK. Could you tell us a little bit maybe about pro-life movement in UK, in particular March for Life UK? Yeah,
so March for Life started as a midway event for the 40-day campaign that I run in Birmingham. So we run 40 Days for Life, and during that campaign, normally halfway through the campaign, we'd hold some kind of event. So we started off by holding just a sort of low-key procession through the town, you know, with our supporters. So there was maybe, you know, just under 100 people came along. And I think at that point, you know, we suddenly realised that there is a need to have this, you know, aside from the 40 days, alongside the 40 Days for Life, not just as something small, but something nationwide. So whilst we felt it was very important to carry on praying outside the abortion centres, we also decided to have a national march, which we branded March for Life UK. And that started in Birmingham, but we've now moved to London. Last year we had about 7,000 people coming on that, a lot of young people, and actually an increasing amount of clergy coming along as well, which was really encouraging to see how many priests and religious were coming out to support the march and witnessing to their faith in that way.
And I think what's amazing is that I've realized that it's not only Christians who are supportive of, you know, being pro-life, but also members of other religious groups and other religions.
Yes, and actually on the March for Life we have a very dedicated group of pro-life atheists who come along with their own T-shirts, you know, and it's great that they can see just the humanity of the unborn child. Like you say, aside from any religion or politics, we should all be able to recognise what is a human, you know, and they're witnessing to that.
So recently I had the opportunity to talk with Robert Colquhoun, the International Campaign Director for 40 Days for Life. And, you know, he also came to Hungary to sort of help and encourage the pro-life advocates for 40 Days of Life. What brought you to Hungary?
So I was actually really delighted to be invited by the March for Life here. So March for Life in Hungary, they had their annual event on Sunday. And I was invited to come along and speak at this event and to march alongside them. And I was just so encouraged by some of the other speakers they had there, some amazing testimonies they had at the march. And I always find that when I go to other events, whilst I might be participating or I might be speaking, I find that I'm just constantly learning from other people as well, you know, particularly testimonies. You might think that you've got the facts in your head, but when you hear somebody's own testimony, that just moves your heart in a new way and makes you feel even more motivated to carry on with the work that we do.
And of course, here in Hungary, we have well, the same challenges, but in many ways, different challenges. What do you think of the pro-life movement here in Hungary? What have you experienced in the past 2 days?
My experience is that it's very vibrant, you know, and in a way along similar lines to what we're doing in the UK. So they've got a very lively 40 Days for Life campaign here in Hungary, and I've met the leaders of that, and their campaign is really active, so I'd certainly encourage people to get involved in that. And like I say, also the March for Life, which has been going for some time now, and just, you know, I know that they really encourage people to come along and witness for them. And whilst we've got, in a way, quite different laws. I know the law in Hungary, I think it's up till 12 weeks that you're allowed to have abortions, whereas in the UK it's up till 24 weeks for pretty much any reason, and then obviously up till birth for certain conditions. we're ultimately still fighting the same battle. And I think it is really good to kind of, come together when we can and recognise that sense of community that there exists amongst different countries. And certainly from a spiritual perspective, we all recognise the battle that we're facing.
In terms of your ministry as March for Life, as director, what are other challenges? Of course, this is very, very obvious. Your story of arrest. This kind of shows what the challenges are. But what about other ones, or what about your achievements on a regular basis?
I'd say kind of two of the challenges that I particularly sense we're facing at the moment is recognising the importance of men speaking up on this issue. And I see a very strong push from those who support abortion to really shut down men completely and say, this isn't your issue, you haven't got a voice, keep out of it. And yet, if we don't have men speaking up on the issue of abortion, the laws will get worse and worse because we recognise their part in abortion. Often it's because men have stood back, not been supportive of their own child and the mother of their child, and laws that encourage this to happen by saying it's solely the woman's decision and nothing to do with the man whilst the woman is still pregnant. But men have a really important role to play in that healing. I mean, I've certainly witnessed with the 40 Days for Life campaign that I run, more women have decided to continue their pregnancy after speaking to men than after speaking to women. And that's not to say that women don't have a hugely important role, but men have a very important role as well in affirming life and affirming women in their role as mothers. So I think we need to have a place, more of a place for men in the pro-life movement. And also I know particularly in the UK, sometimes we are very keen to paint this simply as a scientific discussion, nothing to do with religion. And whilst we do need to recognise the importance of this issue aside from our faith, we do need to make sure that we bring God into it as well, because without God, we are never going to win this battle. So we do need to make sure that in our efforts to connect with those who don't have a faith, that we don't lose our own faith.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always a huge challenge. I think even here, for us here in Hungary. But that's interesting that you've mentioned the role of men, because, in Western society, but I think also here in Central Eastern Europe and the more Eastern you go, people did start to question the legitimacy of men speaking out on this particular issue.
Yeah, I remember one of the March for Lives that we had in London just I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. There was a group of abortion supporters that came to sort of counter-protest our march. And I remember a man standing at the front of their gathering that they had, proudly holding a poster that said, "No uterus, no opinion." And he seemed very pleased with this poster that was, invalidating his own right to be there.
Exactly.
And didn't see the irony of it. But so many men nowadays are almost feeling this is what that they have to say. They have to say that, my opinion isn't as important as a woman, that whatever you think, that's fine because you're a woman. And like I say, the laws actually help this, because the law is saying, whilst a woman is pregnant, basically, if you're a man, stay out of it. It's none of your business. But the irony is when the child is born, if the child is born, I should say, if a man then doesn't want to have anything to do with it, he's considered to be a loser. It's like, this is terrible. The man isn't supporting his child, which is, it's great that we realise then that it's important a man get involved. But we need to recognise that woman needs support right from conception as well as the child. She needs support right from the time she conceives her new child. Because often that's a time that women can feel very vulnerable, very alone. And to have a man saying, "Oh, it's up to you, whatever you think goes," what support is that? So we do need to recognise how important it is to have men working alongside women during their pregnancy, offering that support and being there for them and feeling that they can speak out. They have got a voice, they have got a role.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the culture and, the society is even telling us, and it seems like in the UK, even the law is telling that, no men should be passive. They should stand out, they should stay out from this issue. And yeah, that I can imagine that is sort of very discouraging for other men. Absolutely. I asked Robert, so I thought when he was here, I asked him, what are your hopes for the future of the pro-life movement, particularly in the UK, but also maybe here in Hungary, as you saw the movement in the past 2 days, and indeed in the whole world?
Through speaking to people, I find that there's a lot of people who do identify with the pro-life position, particularly if I've gone into churches and connected with Christian communities of various denominations. There's a huge amount of people who would say, yes, I'm pro-life, but then they don't actually do anything about it. You know, and I often say to people, if it became illegal tomorrow to be pro-life, would there be any evidence to convict you? And everybody should be able to say yes. It's a bit like with our faith. If nobody knows we're a Christian, are we really a Christian? And if we're pro-life, that is just an extension of the gospel, of, you know, the Great Commission to go out to the whole world and spread the good news. The fact that every person from the moment of conception is made in the image and likeness of God. This is the best news. Why aren't we sharing it? And my hope would be that everybody who considers themselves to be pro-life finds the courage and finds that sense of priority to go out and do something to share that, whatever activity that might be that's, you know, relevant to their own state in life. But there is something that everybody can do, whether that might be going outside an abortion centre or joining a march, whether that might be helping in a crisis pregnancy centre or helping those who've been hurt by abortion in that ministry, politics, schools. There's so many different fields that we can work in. And if everybody finds their place in that, then I actually think the pro-life movement would just surge forward. So I think we do need to find our courage to do that, and also need to go about that in the right way. And one of the ways that we encourage with March for Life is when we're talking about abortion, we need to get back to the heart of the issue and keep asking that question of what does it mean to be pregnant? Because so often I hear people discussing abortion and they're discussing, you know, what about if a woman conceives in this or that situation? What about if the child's disabled? What about if the woman herself has got health difficulties? You know, all these difficult situations. But before they've even looked at what does pregnancy mean? You know, if you and I can't agree on what it means to be pregnant, we're not going to have a constructive conversation on abortion. So my hope is that people will learn how to talk about this issue in a constructive way so that we can have more fruitful discussions rather than just arguments or rather than staying silent.
Yeah. So in about 5 to 10 years, would you say that it is possible in the UK that abortion would be abolished? Like, I mean, we saw that in the US with Roe v. Wade being lifted in many states. Do you think there's something similar is possible to happen in the UK?
At the moment, things are looking really dark in the UK. But as they always say, you know, the darkest moment comes before the dawn. And I do think we need to not only just, you know, think, oh, this could happen. We need to know that it will. At some point, abortion will be abolished. God ultimately is in control of when that will be, but we need to do our part, and we need to believe to play our part. If we're just thinking it might be abolished sometimes, then that doesn't really maybe give us that motivation. I think we really need to believe that it will. Truth will prevail if we do our part in that. We can't just think, you know, I'll pray and leave it up to God. We need to pray and we need to act, and abortion will become history. And a bit like Mother Teresa of Calcutta always says, it's that one person at a time that she would reach. That's what we need to do with abortion. Yes, some people might have the opportunity to speak to masses. Everybody's got an opportunity to speak to one person, whoever that might be, whether it's your friend at university, whether it's somebody in your family, whether it's somebody actually in a crisis pregnancy, it'd be somebody who's had abortions. To find that person who you might know who's maybe struggling with this issue and talk to them about it, and that will help yourself, help clarify your own beliefs, and then you will be doing your duty as a Christian to actually share that gospel of life with others.
And finally, Isabel, I've also asked this question from Robert, but I'm just really curious about your opinion. So here in Hungary, you know, abortion has been legalized for decades, and it's been an issue. You know, it's been getting better. The numbers are decreasing, but still, we're talking about every single year, over 20,000 Hungarian babies are killed due to abortions. And, you know, we've been saying that we have a family-friendly government, but we see that even they would say sometimes that, you know, well, the society is not ready for zero-tolerance laws. But how about, you know, just completely lifting up abortion from the healthcare system, especially that it has nothing to do with it? What do you think of that?
Yeah, interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine who's had multiple abortions, which she deeply regrets now. And she said to me, if abortion had been illegal, I would never have had an abortion. And I actually hear that quite a lot from women that I've spoken to who've had an abortion. A lot of people, sadly, nowadays will get their sense of right and wrong from the law. You know, particularly nowadays, our moral compasses aren't what they should be. And if the law says something is okay, then that's the go-ahead for many people. How could it possibly be wrong if it's, you know, if it's legal? How could it possibly be damaging to me physically or mentally or emotionally if it's legal? So I do think that even if we still believe that some women might get pills off the internet or whatever it might be, it is really important to have that law that says this is never a solution to any problem, no matter what problems a woman might face or a couple might face. Killing an innocent child isn't going to solve that problem. That isn't how we solve problems in today's society, or it shouldn't be, by killing little children. And I always say that, you know, the damage abortion inflicts on women alone, that should be enough to make us pro-life. If we really are pro-women, which we hear this mantra all the time, you know, women's rights and you know, furthering the cause of you know, what it is to be a woman. This is the greatest gift that God gives to women, is the gift of motherhood. Nothing can stop a woman being a mother once she has conceived a child. No pill, no surgery, not life or death. There's nothing that stops a woman being a mother once she has conceived that child. And this is one of the biggest lies that's sold. Or take this pill and you can stop being a mother. Have this surgery and you won't be a mother anymore. You know, motherhood is something for eternity. Once you are a mother, you are a mother forever. And that is something that we need to recognise is a gift. And help mothers to feel that, because I appreciate from a human perspective, it can sometimes be very, very difficult. We need to make sure that there is that support for women so that they can embrace it as a gift. And that's very hard, because those of us, like myself and people like Robert, who are helping people to go outside abortion centres, offering alternatives, we're actually being turned away so that there is nobody to speak to these women who are in these really difficult situations. So we need to make sure that we not only stand up for our rights, but we recognise our responsibilities to get involved.
Well, thank you so much, Isabel. It was such a pleasure to talk to you today. And I know you're flying back to the UK soon. So thank you so much for taking time to coming here into our studio, and have a very safe and blessed flight.
It's been an absolute honour. Thank you.
Thank you.